We are living through a very difficult and turbulent time. And for all of the co-op and condominium buildings that have been constructed or converted in the last decade, particularly those that still have large sponsor presidents, this is a particularly scary event with which we are presently living. Some of the problems seem insurmountable, and in many instances, people who've plunged their life savings into buying apartments think that they've flushed their money down the toilet. The reality, however, is we've lived through these times like this before, and the buildings that seem to have been in the worst shape came through it and are now some of the most successful buildings in New York. One such example is the City Spire condominium building on 56th Street, which was thrown into bankruptcy. It had 265 families living in it. There were $400 million worth of mechanics liens and claims against the sponsor, and the city took away the temporary certificate of occupancy. Amazingly, within 3 years of those events, the building was completed, the prices began to appreciate. None of the unit owners lost their homes or their investments, and the building now is one of the most successful and carrying the highest prices in the city. So these things can happen. Living through that experience at the time was amazing because it required ingenuity, a tremendous amount of cooperation from the unit owners, and we did not get much cooperation from city and state officials, so we had to solve the problems ourselves. There are 5 lessons that came out of that experience that I think are very relevant today because we're facing the same type of situation. The first was, or the first is, question your engineer, and for that matter, all of your professionals, and look for a better solution. One of the things about City Spire was that the city objected because of a whistle that emanated from the roof, and we were told by engineers that it would cost $5 million to correct the whistle. Of course, there wasn't $5 million, there wasn't $5,000 around to solve the problems. But an engineer and I talked about it, and we realized that the whistle sound was much like when a window of a car is open a crack and there's a whistling sound. And if the window is open all the way, there is no longer a whistling sound. And we went up to 75th story, the roof of the building, and looked at the cupola over the mechanical equipment, and found that it was consisted of 5-inch vinyl slats. We had 2 construction workers remove every other slat. It cost a grand total of $3,500, and 18 years later, the building has never whistled again. So you really need to talk to your professionals and just don't take their saying this is the way it has to be done as a solution, and sometimes you have to bring in a second opinion in order to make sure that your interests are being protected. The second piece of advice is take a chance. When I put together the restructuring at City Spire, we needed $5 million for all of the other work that had to be done. The elevators, only 1 of 4 elevators were in, the life safety systems weren't in, the building wasn't waterproofed, and no one, of course, wanted to lend the money. But I came up with an idea of borrowing against future common charges. I was able to get European American Bank to agree to lend against that income stream. My law firm wrote an opinion, sort of a leap of faith that I guessed correctly, and we were able to find the money to complete the building. After City Spire was completed, I lobbied the legislature for 2 years to have the Condominium Act amended to provide for condo boards to be able to do financing, and it ultimately became 339JJ of the real property law. I still have the governor's signing pen encased in a frame at home. The third piece of advice, and singularly the most important, is keep the unit owners united. The last thing that you need going through these difficult situations is the unit owners breaking up into 1 or 2 or 3 groups, thinking that they had the best solution. When we fought on behalf of the tenants at Rupert Yorkville, and was able to get the landlord to agree to convert the building to a condominium rather than to just leave the Mitchell-Lama program, we had 900 tenants, and notwithstanding regular fights among them, we were able to keep them together. And the same thing was true at CitySpire during this entire period of time. There were only 265 residents, but they stood together, and we didn't have to deal with discrepancies among the group. And one of the main ways of keeping them together is regular communications. And we just buried them with everybody with communications. Now, sometimes it's difficult when you're involved in a complex, tricky matter to communicate with the unit owners because you don't want the other side to understand what your strategy is. And that's important for the unit owners to understand. And whenever I handled one of these situations, there were regular meetings of the unit owners in which I attended and made sure everybody understood that we had a strategy and we were following it, but we couldn't really describe the strategy for the very reason that if the other side knew what we were doing, we would be at a loss. The fourth rule of thumb is the thing that I think is significant in every way and walk of life, and that is listen. Frequently, professionals don't listen to their clients because we've been doing this for decades and we know how it's done. But what you learn or should learn is that by listening to the unit owners, the shareholders, the managing agent, anybody who's talking, listening to what they're actually saying and try to understand what they're not saying. Try to be as observant as you possibly can, because you learn a tremendous amount and that will help you structure a solution. When I did the restructuring at Hyde Park Gardens in Queens, which was an absolute mess, and Claire Schulman and I were meeting repeatedly with all of the lenders. There was 26 lending groups involved in Hyde Park Gardens. The way it ultimately got resolved was sitting down with the residents of Hyde Park Gardens and understanding exactly what their concerns were and coming up with a solution that protected everybody. So listening is critical. And the last piece of advice, which I always tell clients and was very instrumental in getting CitySpire resolved. It was instrumental in getting Worldwide Plaza done. Instrumental in virtually every aspect of this type of environment is don't get bogged down with peripheral issues. You identify what your goal is, you move towards that goal, and you don't get involved in other issues that aren't initially important. In other words, if you want to get the building finished, this is not the time to start arguing over what kind of carpeting is going to be in the lobby. If you have to fight with the sponsor, if you have to deal with government agencies, then this is not the time to discuss the storage bins in the basement. Just focus on what is actually important. Identify the goal and work towards that goal, and leave less important things till later. The problems might seem overwhelming right now, but there is a resolution, and the resolution comes from the fact that, notwithstanding anything else, New York City is a strong, vibrant city consisting of 8.5 million people, and there are only 3 million housing units in New York, which means that there is a shortage of housing. And since there's a shortage of housing, as the economy improves, every building's problem will ultimately be resolved and the market will appreciate again, because there's been so little construction over the last 60 years. So keep heart, focus on what has to be done, and you will get to the end of this. And within 2 or 3 years after you finish, the value will be back where it should be. Thank you.